Moving on to Rwanda. Yeah, so, I like that song, eh? We can watch that movie after, but right now, can we stay focused? This is very serious. My people, last week, Rwandan lawmakers voted in support of Mr. President running for third term. I'm like, what? Paul Kagame, who has been in power since the year 2000, 15 years ago, the man still wants to do third term. Hey, you see what I'm saying? His political party, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, has been in power since 1994, 21 years ago. Yes! In fact, the MPs voted not just for third term, but they voted in support of a petition to remove presidential term limits completely from the Rwandan constitution, which means that Kagame can extend his rule even beyond the third term. Why do we like to do this in Africa? Why is it that once they get in power, they don't want to leave? Some of them would do well, and then they want to do third term, and they just spoil everything by that ojukokoro of wanting to do third term. What do they call ojukokoro in English? Thank you, Jare. Greed. Because of greed, they want to spoil all their good works. Why must you do third term? And don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of arguments that if that is what works in Africa, why must we change government every few years like they do in Western countries? I said, maybe these people have a point, but why do we call it democracy if you will not be democratic in sharing power? Stop calling it democracy if one man must rule by fire by force till death. Just change the name. That is the only problem that I have with it, is that you keep calling it democracy, but you're not willing to share power. Don't get me upset, Joe. So first of all, I like to say that Kagame actually deserves credit in many ways. He revived the economy after the genocide, and I've heard that in Rwanda, especially in the cities like the capital Kigali, I've heard that electricity is stable, as in you get 24 hours of electricity, something that we don't enjoy right now in Nigeria. Not only that, I heard that water is constantly running and that the roads are good. In fact, a Nigerian friend of mine that was there last month said, Adela, I was so ashamed of being a Nigerian when I got to Rwanda. I'm telling you, there was no litter on the street. Everywhere was clean. I was like, no kidding. Another thing to praise Kagame for is having a lot of young people in government. I've heard that there are so many 30-something-year-olds in key positions. Again, I have never been to Rwanda, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but these are things that I've heard. But having said all that, the man is also described as an authoritarian ruler and a dictator for two reasons. No press freedom in Rwanda, none whatsoever. In fact, in Rwanda, the penal code, Article 234, says a journalist can face up to a year for writing or saying or drawing anything that may be perceived as insulting to a government official or police. Which means they can't even draw political cartoons that may be perceived as insulting to any government official. And then this penalty doubles to 2 years in prison if the journalist writes or says anything or asks any question in court or parliament that may be perceived as insulting, which means that you cannot ask members of parliament questions that may be considered insulting. Now, if the journalist writes any story that is perceived as insulting towards Mr. President, I'm telling you, that warrants 5 years in prison. Just imagine. So if somebody is doing a show like I'm doing now, and you know how I say all this stuff about Mr. President, Jonathan, or Buhari, I could be arrested and given 5 years in prison for keeping it real. Hey, this is not fair. And as a result of this, many journalists in Rwanda actually censor themselves because nobody wants to go to jail. So when it comes to reporting the activities of the military and that of Mr. President, you better keep your mouth shut. That's what people tell each other. The second reason that he's considered a dictator is that he's very ruthless against critics and opposition figures, whether they are at home or abroad. Kagame does not tolerate any strong opposition voice. In fact, many of his former comrades have fled the country saying that their lives are threatened. So the Democratic Green Party, that is Rwanda's only credible opposition group, they've said that they oppose this plan to amend the constitution to allow the president to run for third term. Despite that, though, the MPs went ahead saying that, they got more than 3 million signatures in a petition. So therefore, everybody in Rwanda wants Kagame to come back. Keep in mind that the population of Rwanda is 11.8 million. It's not as if this signature even represents half of the population. Also, many people that signed the petition said that they were forced to sign it.
This young man didn't want to sign. He says he was threatened as a result.
When I refused, the local mayor said that if I needed any type of administrative form or document, I wouldn't be able to get it. They treated me like an enemy of the state.
Just imagine that. They actually threatened people to sign the petition. Now, one thing that you probably won't hear of or see any photos of is people protesting in Rwanda, like how people have been protesting in Burundi when their president said he would run for third term. That's because protests are not allowed in Rwanda. You are not allowed to protest. You will be arrested. People who criticize the government lose their jobs or they get arrested. So if you go out on the street trying to protest, they arrest you, they harass you. Nobody even wants to associate with you because of the consequences of being labeled as a protester. So Rwandans outside Rwanda would protest. They protest in UK, in US, but you will not hear of Rwandans in Rwanda protesting. So right now that the president said he wants to do third term, you will probably not hear any of them complaining, but that's because they are not allowed to, which is very, very sad. So many people even link Kagame in the genocide that killed 800,000 people in Rwanda, but of course no one is allowed to say anything about that because it would be considered insulting to the presidency and you're facing 5 years in prison. So it's very obvious that the government of Rwanda wanted to change the constitution, but they wanted to make it look as if the change was being driven by the people. That's why they went by trying to get signatures and forcing a lot of people to sign the petition. However, if term limits are removed in Rwanda and Kagame runs again, then he would join a growing list of leaders in East Africa who are no longer practicing democracy, even though they say they practice democracy. Like in Uganda, for example, where the president has been in power since 1986, yet is expected to run again next year. It's so funny that the president of Uganda, the man that has been in power for 28 years, is now the one trying to convince the president of Burundi not to run for third time. Look at that. How ironic. Of course, it did not work. It's actually a joke that he will be the one trying to tell the president of Rwanda not to run. Which is why Burundians have continued to face political unrest over their president's bid for third term. Anyway, you guys know I don't know anything. I'll keep you updated about whatever happens in Rwanda. I don't know why some African leaders feel like they are the only savior. They are the only one that knows how to do good stuff. When you do well and then you overstay your time, you start to lose your popularity among people. You guys know I don't know anything. Guess what? I'm just keeping it real.